In this episode, we're going to be diving into minimalism and how it can help you live a better life. What's up, friends? Welcome to The Beautiful Mess, where we talk about tools and tactics to improve your life. I'm your host, Paul Didis, a minimalist and a content creator who's super excited today to talk about minimalism and how minimalism can help you live a more meaningful life. First off, for those that are new to minimalism, what is it and why should you even care? You might have this imagery of minimalism as somebody that owns 2 socks and 1 spoon, 3 knives, and like very bare bones. They live out of their backpack. And to some people, that's what it is. And to others, it looks drastically different. As you can tell behind me, there are books. If you're listening to this, you can also watch on YouTube. And if you're watching right now on YouTube, or if you want to check it out on YouTube, hit that subscribe button down below. Would love to have you in the Messy fam. Anyways, I love books. And that's one of the areas that you might, if you from the outside looking in, you might be like, hey, he owns more than 20 books. How is this guy a minimalist? But I believe that minimalism can be lived out in many different ways, depending on your individual circumstance. So I don't think it's one of those cases that one size fits all. So like if you're a minimalist, then everybody should apply these exact principles. That said, I think there are underlying things that people should adapt if they want to live the minimalist lifestyle. It's more of a mindset. It's not necessarily like these rules of minimalism, but it's like, what are those things or areas in my life where I could take away things, whether it's objects, barriers in your life? Like, what are those things like that are keeping you from living a fulfilling life? And just taking those out of your life. Maybe it's clutter. Maybe you've got like a certain part of your house that's just like super cluttered and you're just done with that. And you want it to like have it where it's, you walk into the room and you feel like uplifted instead of like your soul got sucked out because you can hardly walk because there's stuff all over the floor and you're just done with it. You're like, hey, I need to change. Something needs to change. And so if that's you, or if you just feel like, hey, I'm ready to kind of like live simpler, to live a more meaningful life where I decide, hey, these are the things that I value. And so I'm going to live according to those values. And I think that's like great. And I think nearly everybody can live a certain type of minimalism in their life. It doesn't, again, mean that you own 10 books. It doesn't mean that you're living out of your backpack. It means that you're living life to the full. It means that you're living with passion and purpose. And that's where the hope is that with minimalism, you can like eliminate the excess so that all of a sudden you can see, like, it's like you're taking up these you have all these like blinders in front of you and it makes it hard for you to see. And I think that's what minimalism does well, is it reduces the amount of clutter in your life so that you can see things a little bit more clearly. Because the more things that you have in your life, the more things that you have to maintain, to think about. I'm going to give you like a personal like example of this. So right now I have actually on this desk, there are 3 computers. I kid you not. There are 3 computers. There's this massive iMac, 27-inch iMac right up here. And then you have this MacBook Pro 2015, which, has served me well. And then I've got the new M2 MacBook Pro right here. And so like going from these different devices, like all of a sudden it's like, oh, I've got to change this one out. And so like right now, this is not where I want to be, but I'm practicing minimalism by decluttering these. So one of them is going to go back to somebody. The other one I'm going to sell to like a family member or something. And then, my new device, I'm going to set that up as my main, place where all of my information is stored. And that's one way that you might consider being a minimalist, is like your technology. Do you own multiple computers right now? Do you really need multiple computers? Maybe you have a desktop and a laptop. Nowadays, with the new technology, especially if you're looking at the new M2 Pro, M2 Max chips, those things are very much like in line with a lot of desktops even. I mean, if you need like super power, then maybe you need something beyond it. But for probably the large majority of the people, these things do amazing. They're a little bit pricier, but like there's also cheaper options out there. If you don't need the portability, then maybe you go with something that's, like a Mac Mini or something, or there's also Windows devices. But like ways to simplify that. Like, do you really need, like maybe you have like 2 phones for work. Do you really need 2 phones for work? Maybe you're like, your computer has like so many apps that you just have a hard time navigating, or you're like, the bar at the bottom of your computer, the task bar, I think that's what they call it. On Mac, what do they call it? The dock. They call it the dock. But is that cluttered? Like, do you have like so many icons? Like by default, Macs come with like a long like thing of applications. And every time you need to switch applications, you're going to look at this long list of like icons. Imagine just for a second, if you just took 5 minutes right now and go clean that up, like take out any app that you haven't used in the last, let's say 48 hours, because, or week, if you want to make it a little bit longer, and get rid of the rest. I mean, if you still need that application, keep it, but like you can at least eliminate it from that, prime real estate. Just put the things that you use on a regular basis right there to make it easy access. And then your brain doesn't have to decide, oh, which one of these icons should I pick? It's like, there's only the ones that I use on a regular basis that I switch between often. The other thing that I recommend is using like the search functionality. I don't think people use this enough, is learning how to navigate your computer by keyboard for the most part. And so on Mac, you can press Command Spacebar, and that brings up a search. And so for all the other apps that you have hidden, instead of going click, 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 open up the, applications window and see all the apps, you can just hit Command Spacebar, type in the app that you're looking for, boom, you got it. And you're not going to be distracted by any other apps that you might have on your computer or on your phone for that matter. And that's another recommendation, is that if you have social media on your phone, don't put it front and center. Hide it so that you have to search for it or have to go through your list of apps to find it. So you want to make those things that you want to avoid harder. And then you want to make those things that you want to do on a regular basis, those things that might help you be more productive or creative, to live a more fulfilling life, put those more front and center. So on my dock, typically speaking, a lot of things that I have on it is like, my browser of choice, which currently is Chrome. Another browser that's up and coming that you might want to check out is Arc. By the browser company, I believe it is. It's new. I had to wait like a couple weeks to get an invitation to try it out, but it's pretty sweet, and could be the future of browsing. The layout is a little bit, I had to get used to it, but anyways. So yeah, you might have your browser, and then I have like my creative apps that I use, some Adobe, some Apple creative products, and then DaVinci Resolve, like the typical go-to Photoshop, Illustrator. Illustrator, I don't use as often as Photoshop, so that one usually doesn't live on my dock. But like all the other apps that I'm using on a regular basis, I'd like to have it so that I can easily click. I've tried it also with it out. I go back and forth. Sometimes I take them off. Sometimes I leave them on. But like a calendar app, notes app, your project management tool, whether it's Asana, ClickUp, you name it, a to-do list app, those things that you might need on a regular basis so that you can quickly get to whenever you need it. So that's my recommendation, is like, look at the different areas of your life and see how you can simplify it. Don't just accept it as is. Like maybe, I mean, like if it's good, then just go with it. But if there's ways to improve it, that's not going to take you long to do. Like, I don't think we realize that to make these fundamental changes that like will have big results, it doesn't usually have to take that long. For example, one of the things that I did recently was I cleaned out my fridge. And it's like a simple thing to do. And many times, like we just let things kind of become like a greenhouse where things start growing that shouldn't be growing in your fridge. And it's just like, okay, this doesn't make sense. I'm thinking about testing this out. I've seen it before in different people's pantries, and I think even in their fridge, is having like labels. And so that like there's certain things, there are staples that you get every single week. You typically have like a couple things that you get regularly. And so if you have like a defined spot in your fridge for that thing, there's going to be a lot less searching for this one thing. And then you're not going to go to the grocery store as much, not knowing, do I have this or not? You can easily see like, oh, I'm out of this thing that I usually get. Let me go pick that up. And let's just say right now, eggs are ridiculously expensive. I don't know what's up with that, but if you own some hens, you're probably doing all right. You're doing all right. So maybe we should all, get back to the simple living. Get yourself a little bit of land. Get yourself some hens, and get some chicken eggs. But man, I saw a friend of mine posted a picture, and I think the eggs, like for just like a dozen, I think it was like $28, $29 for just a dozen. That is just insane. I could not, like, rationalizing buying that many, just 12 eggs for like $29 just seems like crazy. We live in some strange times. But going back to the fridge example, like there's areas of our life that we just start living by default. And we, probably by no fault of yours, it's by default. You just started doing things a certain way, and you just didn't realize that there could be a better way, an easier way. Because I don't want to suggest something that's going to introduce like more friction. Like you want to like eliminate friction, unless you're looking to stop something or to reduce the amount of time that you spend on something. For example, social media is a great example. Maybe you want to put some restrictions in place so that you can limit that. Whether, maybe you have to delete it from your phone to make it harder for you to access. Maybe you just access it on your computer. These are different ideas that you might try if you're looking to simplify your life and find ways to find value outside of your devices that can suck you in and take up your time, take up your energy. And I'll admit that this is like an ongoing thing. This is the beautiful mess. I'm completely honest. It's not always perfect. Our counter, like it's a constant battle. Like I want our counter to be like 100% clean. Some days it's like pristine. It looks gorgeous. And then other days, actually right now, there's mail. There's mail on it. It's just like, it becomes this pile that like grows. But like, that's where it's like, the ideal, at least. That you can live with less, that you can eliminate that. Recently, it's just been a little bit crazier than usual. And so things have piled up. And that's like the part of life. And in the one thing, it actually talks about this, the book, One Thing by Gary Keller, where he says like, basically, there's areas of your life that you kind of have to push to the side, like to allow for room for your one thing, the most important thing in your life, that sometimes there can be like a little bit of chaos in certain areas. And he talks about this idea of like these different kinds of, like you're like a juggler, and you have these different kinds of balls that, like, one's a glass ball where if you drop it, it breaks. And that's not good. And there's other ones that are rubber balls where they bounce back. And so, one example of a glass ball would be your family, because like all of a sudden, like if you're letting that one drop, there's sometimes like you can't easily repair, or there's nothing that you can do to like repair some of that damage that you cause by, putting them off for a time. Like that, it's that important that like you don't want to drop that. Whereas like, maybe your house gets a little bit messy at some point because you realize that there's other things that are more important in that moment. That said, go clean your room. If you haven't done that in a while, and there's no good reason that you aren't doing it right now, as Jordan Peterson so wisely recommends, like get your house in order. I know that there's ways that I should be doing that. And so I'm trying my best to apply that in my own life by reducing clutter and simplifying things, creating systems and processes so that it makes life streamlined. Like a good example of making processes is for this podcast. Since I record it every single week, I've made it down to a system where like I've got a folder that I just duplicate, and it's got all the project files right in there. I just open it up, hit record on my camera, hit record on my computer, and boom, it's going. And so, yeah, I would highly recommend minimalism. If you haven't tried it yet, try it out. Live simply for a little bit and see, does that help you or does it not? If it doesn't, goodbye minimalism, goodbye. But if it does help you live a more intentional, meaningful life, passion and purpose, go for it. Go for it. The other thing, I was reflecting upon this actually on Monday. And if you want to get updates from me, I'm sending out a newsletter. There should be a link for my like top 12 books of the last year. So if you want to check that out, hit the button to get the email. And then so like when you subscribe, like sign up for that, you'll get my emails as well. So you'll stay up to date. But one of the emails that I sent out this week was about taking advantage of like gaps in your day, because I found that like if I use those times intentionally, I can actually get a lot of like creative tasks done. One example is making reels from this podcast, is like taking the podcast episode and clipping it up and posting it on the different platforms. And that way we're growing this community that you're a part of. And I'm super excited to have you a part of it. And people like hoping to live intentional life through minimalism, through technology, through all these different means, and helping each other through that. But like, if you find a gap of 15 minutes or less, instead of thoughtfully scrolling through your news feed, there could be something better for you to do. And so here are some suggestions that I gave in that newsletter. Number one, write to or call a friend. If there's somebody that you haven't reached to in a while, it might be a good time to rekindle that relationship. All it takes is a phone call. Say, hey, how's it going? What's new in your world? Maybe it's an old college friend. Try it. See what happens. That's what I did with Spencer. And look, there's a podcast. We're 60 shows later. You never know what's going to happen. So write to and call a friend. Write a blog post. Maybe you want to start blogging. Just start writing it in that like little gap. See how far you can get in 15 minutes. Or if you have like also a constraint. So my constraint on Monday was I was in the car waiting for my wife to get back from the grocery store. And so I had like this gap of maybe 15, 20, 30 minutes. And so I was like, I'm going to write an email to all those subscribe. And so that's like what you need to take advantage is like identify like, hey, this is a gap. I've got like 5-10 minutes. What can I do in it? Instead of mindlessly using your phone. Another idea is embrace the time and do absolutely nothing. So this was something that I'll leave a link to this down in the description, but like Veritasium has this one video about how boredom is actually really good for you. Really good. And it's amusing that like we don't embrace it enough. I mean, there's science behind like silence and how that's good for you. So just be bored on purpose. And yeah, it actually helps because we're often bombarded by things and we need that time to just process, to just realize, hey, this is good to have space to allow your, brain to digest everything. And then the last recommendation is brainstorm ideas for how to build your business, move a project forward, etc. Like, what are those ways that you can, advance that project that you're working on? Maybe you feel like you're stuck right now and you're just like, hey, like, you're doing the same thing over and over again, but you just don't feel like you're getting anywhere. And so, I would suggest instead of like living by default is like, say, hey, what is like a crazy idea? Like, think about the craziest idea. What is the best way to address this issue? What it could be the best way to address this issue, instead of like taking by default, this is the way things are. This is how it is. It's how we've always done things, because you better believe it. And I hope that you're working for a company that's very adaptive and understanding for those kind of recommendations. But often people just are doing what they're doing because it's just what they've always done. They haven't really questioned why. And so if you come in there with this brainstormed new idea, like, hey, like I just thought of this, I think this would be great for what we're doing. Can we give it a go? Give it a try? And you'd be surprised. Maybe you have the next big idea for your company. Well, friends, I've really enjoyed this time talking about minimalism. And if you did too, be sure to rate, review, subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Or if you watch it, we're on Spotify, YouTube, Facebook. Would love to have you in the Messy Fam. And until next time, my friends, stay messy.